The date is July 2019, and rumors of a military buildup of Chinese forces across the strait from Taiwan begin to leak to the international press. As the 4th of July is celebrated here at home, thousands of miles away, Taiwan begins to move their command and control functions into hardened nuclear-proof underground facilities. F-16s and other strike aircraft are moved into mountain bases, and dummy missile batteries and anti-aircraft platforms are set up around the island of Taiwan. August rolls around, and by now it's clear to the world that China is indeed massing what looks like an invasion force on its side of the Taiwan Strait. Though the Chinese leader Xi Jinping reassures the world that he's only interested in a peaceful reunification of Taiwan and the mainland. The American military is put at DEFCON 3, which signals the Air Force to be ready to mobilize for a potential nuclear conflict in just 15 minutes. As September comes, the Chinese military has begun commandeering civilian ships in order to help move its 1 million man strong invasion force across the channel. The Chinese military lacks the amphibious capability to move more than a few thousand troops at a time. But in order to face 100,000 Taiwanese defenders and their 2 million reservists, the People's Liberation Army will need every available ship it can get its hands on, no matter how big or small. Across the strait, Taiwan has begun littering the only 13 beaches that an invasion force could be landed on with mines, razor wire, and other horrific surprises. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is fully mobilized by now, and the United States is at DEFCON 2. All military leave is canceled, and Marines board transports as they head for bases in Australia, Japan, and Guam. PACOM's carrier groups disperse 1,000 miles offshore from Taiwan, careful to make sure that they do not stray too deep into the net of ballistic missile coverage that China uses to threaten American naval vessels. There's no hiding China's intentions now. An invasion of Taiwan is coming, and the entire world knows it. Taiwanese troops, supplemented by a few thousand rapid response American forces, dig in for what will be the largest amphibious assault in history. The date is October 3, 2019. The seas between Taiwan and China are finally calm again, presenting a narrow 4-week opportunity for an amphibious assault that only reoccurs briefly one other time of the year, in May. Chinese troops are rushed to waiting transports. The lucky ones board military amphibious landing craft, while the unlucky ones must make the treacherous crossing on civilian boats with little if any protection. Overhead, hundreds of missiles fly out over the strait, slamming into radar, communications, and control nodes all over the island. Airfields are cratered. Civilian power plants are destroyed. Chinese jets scream overhead en route to strike at Taiwanese tanks and artillery pieces, shortly after followed by Chinese bombers. Yet the Taiwanese Air Force has long been redeployed to underground facilities, and American-made F-16s flown by Taiwanese pilots rise up to meet the incoming Chinese planes. 1,000 miles away, U.S. carrier battle groups are given the green light to advance to forward positions just off the Taiwan coast, bringing a significant portion of America's naval air power. They alone are more than a match for the Chinese Air Force. Yet as they steam ahead, a rain of ballistic missiles falls upon the battle groups. Anti-missile defense systems intercept many, yet others manage to slip through and deal devastating blows against American supercarriers. In moments, thousands of American sailors are dead. And in the first 5 minutes of the war, more American servicemen have died than in all conflicts combined since Vietnam. By the end of the first month of fighting, American casualties will reach Vietnam War levels, with Chinese and Taiwanese casualties many times that number. By the end of 2019, the war will officially be the bloodiest conflict since World War II. But could such a war really happen? And if it did, could you actually be drafted to fight in it? The sad answer is yes. And in fact, American military planners consider the Taiwan-China situation to be one of the several flashpoints that would lead directly to a Third World War. China, for its part, has long claimed that it seeks only a peaceful reunification with the island nation. Yet, just in 2016, Xi Jinping stated, "We have the determination, the ability, and the preparedness to deal with Taiwanese independence. And if we do not deal with it, we will be overthrown." China views Taiwan's continued independence as more than the historical thorn in its side, but now rather as a direct threat to the mainland's continued communist leadership. This is because the island nation has only grown more prosperous and economically powerful over the decades, becoming the 19th largest economy in the world. Taiwan also directly employs many mainland Chinese citizens, either on the island itself or in off-site factories and offices run by Taiwanese businesses. The same cannot be said in large numbers of China's influence on Taiwan. Yet, even more dangerous than Taiwan's prosperity is what Xi Jinping and Chinese leadership fear the most: its liberal democracy. Taiwan's liberal democratic values completely undermined China's own hardline nationalistic values. While China enforces strict censorship, Taiwan espouses the same liberal values that America does, and mainland Chinese have begun to take notice. Pro-democracy demonstrations continue to grow within China, and as Chinese citizens spend more time abroad both in Taiwan and Europe and America, they are starting to bring democratic values back home with them. For China, Taiwan's continued independence is a deathly threat that must one day be eliminated, and increasingly, it looks like plans to eliminate Taiwan's independence are to do so by force. Yet, if China were to launch a war against Taiwan, currently one of the likeliest conflicts that the US actively prepares for, then America would be treaty-bound to defend the island's democracy. This would pit the two largest economies and military powers in the world against each other. And while the US would inevitably come out slightly ahead of China, casualties on both sides would be staggering. To this end, America would immediately need to boost its active military forces. The first step in bolstering American forces would be an immediate call-up of all reservists. With 860,000 reservists, any draft notices would likely not come for a while. Yet, depending on the scale of the war and America's objectives, a draft may ultimately be inevitable. Currently, America has two objectives to achieve in any conflict with China. The first being the complete destruction of its air and naval forces, and the second being the toppling of its communist government. The total destruction of all Chinese naval and air forces are a non-negotiable objective, meaning that no matter how the war went, unless it somehow went extremely poorly for the US, there would be no negotiations for a ceasefire until this objective was met. The US would direct all of its efforts and resources at ensuring that no Chinese naval or air forces survive the conflict. And the reasoning is quite simple. China cannot hope to fight a second war if its Navy and Air Force is destroyed, and a lengthy rearmament period would take a decade or more, giving ample opportunity for the US and allies to rearm themselves. The removal of China's communist government is an ancillary objective, which would be carried out via precision strikes, covert operations, and psychological operations aimed at the Chinese citizenry. Given that a purely military removal of China's government would require a full-scale land invasion, the US is happy to wage a war and not meet this objective, or leave it in the hands of a civilian population riled up by aggressive psychological operations. In the first scenario, it's unlikely that a draft would be instigated by the US government, given the US's advantages in naval and air forces both. Though both the American Navy and Air Force would suffer significant losses in the effort, China would indubitably face the complete annihilation of its own Navy and Air Force to the Americans and their allies. In this case, reservists would likely be enough to bring American combat strength back to manageable levels, and a draft would be highly unlikely. Yet, if the scope of the conflict expanded for any reason, and a direct removal of China's communist government was the only road to peace, an American draft would be a necessity. With over 2 million active duty forces in the Chinese military, the US and its allies would need to bolster their own numbers significantly to even attempt an invasion of China. All male American citizens and immigrant non-citizens between the ages of 18 and 25 are required by law to register in the Selective Service System. In 2010, the SSS had over 16 million young American men on file, yet the US has a total fit-for-service manpower pool of over 111 million. With an increasingly bloody conflict against China, the SSS would without a doubt be activated, and full-rate conscription would begin for the first time since Vietnam. War with China is not likely, and yet it is considered the most realistic and probable flashpoint for the world's next major war. While the world has not seen any major powers go to war since the end of World War II, and it will hopefully not see them do so ever again, the reality is that several of any possible diplomatic missteps in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait could lead to an unavoidable conflict between the US and China. And with the life of the Chinese Communist Party likely dependent on forcing Taiwan back into the fold and crushing the island's democratic government, the US may be headed straight for another military draft sooner than any of us could have hoped for. Would you willingly volunteer for the draft, or would you try to dodge it? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Sinking of the Unsinkable German World War II Battleship Bismarck. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.